With over 1,000 loyalist Space Marine chapters in Warhammer 40,000, there are countless ways to give each chapter its own unique identity. Obviously, you have the classics, like the Blood Angels, blonde, ridiculously handsome, gifted in the fine arts, and just a little bit prone to going completely insane and devouring the flesh of their enemies. Or their allies. You also have the chapters that were founded in the subsequent foundings, like the Black Templars in the second. They set themselves apart from others by having absolutely unmatched drip, operating on a permanent crusade, and having a very interesting fan base. We also have the Libators, a successor chapter of the Ultramarines who do ritual blood sacrifices of their enemies to honor Guilliman and the Emperor. Because, if there's one thing the golden child of the Emperor of Mankind appreciates, it's ritual blood sacrifices. We have the Exorcists, who were created by the Inquisition in an attempt to make a Space Marines chapter that was resistant to demonic possession and general corruption by chaos. As part of their initiation, each aspiring member of the Exorcists gets literally possessed by a demon. I could go on, but my point is that it's pretty easy to find huge variations amongst the chapters of the Adeptus Astartes, and you can find some pretty weird chapters as well. And I want to clarify that in the universe of 40k, weird is good. More so, weirder is often better. This is a universe where a giant dead guy who's not actually dead guides the fate of quadrillions of humans spread across 1 million planets who have to occasionally team up with the alien races that want to kill them to fight the 4 gods of super hell who are actively trying to destroy reality and harvest everyone's souls. That is pretty weird. So I like my weird Space Marine chapters. And with that said, today we're going to look at a chapter that sits very much on its own, riding a wave of weirdness that is almost unmatched by any other chapter in the Imperium. Today, we're going to talk about the Space Sharks. Now, even though they are pretty weird, the name Space Sharks is just crazy, so I will be calling them their official name, the Carcharodons, from this point on. Space Sharks just makes me think of Sharknado for some reason, which I'm hoping that a sizable portion of this audience is too young to remember. But, looking at my analytics, I'm afraid I probably just caused memory-related brain damage to most of you. Now, before we fully get stuck in with the video, I will be honest with you guys. I've read some of the Carcharodons books, Red Tithe and Outer Dark, but I've yet to read every book about them, so if I miss anything in this video that you would like to add, please do so in the comments. The Carcharodons are a chapter unlike most others, and all the other chapters that seem to have anything in common with them are also really weird, like the Ashen Claws, who we'll talk about in a bit. So without further delay, let's dive in. One of the characteristics that sets the Carcharodons apart from other chapters is their appearance. They have pitch black eyes, extremely pale white skin, and they sharpen their teeth into points. So they look pretty sharky. Not a huge surprise there, but when you read any Carcharodons books, you'll quickly realize the modern day culture that has been used as the main inspiration for them, and that is Polynesian culture, but more specifically, the Maori. They even greet each other by saying kia ore, which is almost identical to kia ora, or hello in Maori. They decorate their armor and their skin with what they call exile markings, which are essentially described as Polynesian-inspired tattoos. Now, I'm not going to sit here as potentially the whitest 40k YouTuber of all time, which is a difficult spot to claim, and pretend to know anything about the unique qualifications of different Polynesian tribal tattoos, but from what I've read, these are basically that. Now, what I absolutely love about the Carcharodons is that they really toe the line between good and bad. And when we're speaking in the context of Space Marines, you know that a good Space Marine is basically the kind of Space Marine to say, you know what, innocent civilian, I was going to crush you for being in my way, and I still really want to, but I think I'll let you live, maybe. I haven't decided yet. And a bad Space Marine is that. So when I say the Carcharodons toe the line between good and bad, it's safe to say that you do not want them showing up on your planet. They will kill you without hesitation, or if you're lucky, take you as a slave to serve for the rest of your life aboard one of their ships. In fact, there's an excerpt in the novel Outer Dark that sums up Master of the Third Company Baal Shar's moral code surrounding the use of slaves pretty well. And to quote this passage, it goes, "Shar knew that mere feet away, in the sweat decks below, thousands of slaves toiled just to keep the ancient warship functioning, let alone provide fodder for the rest of the chapter. It was something he never paused to consider. Without such labor, the chapter would surely have ceased to function during its long exile. And besides, it was tradition." Wow, guys, what a cool tradition. Oh my god. And also, do you know what the definition of fodder is? The Oxford English Dictionary defines fodder as food for farm animals. So when they say that the slaves that keep the ship running also provide fodder for the rest of the chapter, I think you can figure out what they mean. But, to be fair, what else could we expect from a chapter that is literally sharks in space? And also, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that in 40k, the main source of food throughout a lot of the Imperium is known as corpse starch. So, maybe I should get off my high horse when it comes to people or space marines literally eating people. There's also a point in the novel where the Carcharodons go to the homeworld of the Ashen Claws, another long exiled chapter, and are low-key a little grossed out that the Ashen Claws are holding a feast where humans and Astartes are dining side by side. Ugh! How dare they hang out next to gross, disgusting regular people? Don't they know that we're supposed to eat them after they power our ships? But I digress. The Carcharodons are still badass, mainly because of their philosophy surrounding their purpose in the galaxy. They basically hate the Imperium. They hate what it's become. They hate the corruption and the class disparity that exists in the worlds controlled by mankind. Surprisingly woke from the invade a planet, kill everyone, and enslave the survivors for food later chapter. I mean, that is a little bit of an exaggeration. They don't always kill everyone, just most of them. And they don't always enslave literally everyone, just most of them. But what I love the most about the Carcharodons is how their hatred for the current Imperium manifests. They still have an undying sense of loyalty to humanity as a whole. Well, mostly to the Emperor, who they refer to as the Void Father, or Rangu. They just don't get caught up in the small details. The small details being human lives. But that loyalty and love for the Emperor, despite knowing that he could easily have their chapter extinguished once and for all, manifests in, quite frankly, a very beautiful way. Even though each large engagement, each battle that they partake in, every defense of an Imperial world could result in the destruction of their chapter, the Carcharodons still lunge headfirst into every challenge. This is in stark contrast to the aforementioned Ashen Claws, who also remain in exile in the very far reaches of the galaxy. In fact, when Baal Shar led a contingent of Carcharodons to the Ashen Claws' weird, creepy homeworld of Atargatis Prime to seek assistance before they launched an aggressive defense of the Imperial world of Piety 5, this was a point of contention between the two chapters. Shar considered the Ashen Claws' willingness to sit off to the side while Imperial worlds were attacked to be an insult to their Primarch's legacy. Also, when I say the Carcharodons went to the Ashen Claws for assistance, can you guess what I meant? Yeah, they took a bunch of people from Atargatis Prime as slaves. What a surprise. And, after having gotten this assistance from the Ashen Claws, the Carcharodons then charted a course as quickly as possible to Piety 5, as they had received intel that a gene stealer cult had taken root in its capital city of Pontefrax, and was attracting a massive Hive Fleet tendril towards the planet. So, despite being exiled from Imperial space, despite wanting nothing to do with the Imperium itself, and despite knowing that their chapter, which is struggling in virtually every way, could very likely perish completely while facing a Tyranid invasion on their own, the Carcharodons didn't hesitate to dive headfirst into battle. Now, I'd like to take a closer look at two members of the Carcharodons in particular that I think you guys will like hearing about. The first one is the one you're probably all familiar with, the one and only, the space shark's goat, Tyberos the Red Wake. Tyberos is the first captain of the Carcharodons. He barely speaks above a harsh whisper and is never seen outside of his custom-fitted Terminator armor. He's also f***ing ginormous. Holy shit, look at this guy. To be fair, I think this image is a little bit of an exaggeration, but Tyberos is still huge. His Terminator armor is heavily modified to fit his massive stature and bulk. And while he is the chapter master of the Carcharodons and the ship's master of the Carcharodons' flagship, Nicor, he is no stranger to getting his hands dirty when necessary. In that sense, he's kind of like a creepy, void-sailing version of Marneus Calgar. But where Calgar has the gauntlets of Ultramar on his fists, Tyberos enters every battle with something a little more awesome. The massive, devastating lightning claws, Hunger, and Slake. These gauntlets combine barbed power blades on the top with undermounted mechanized chain blades on the palms to rip and tear any enemy that stands before Tyberos to shreds. In fact, while certain groups of the Carcharodons were on the surface of Piety 5, engaging the Genestealer cult there in a literal fight to the death, Tyberos and the remaining Carcharodons found themselves under attack by the Tyranid High Fleet offshoot that was intent on devouring the Imperial world and all of its defenders. The Tyranids launched a boarding vessel at the Night Corps, and Tyberos left his position at the helm of the ship, personally making his way to the point of contact, sealed that segment off from the rest of the ship, slaughtered every Tyranid warrior that made its way onto the ship, and then literally jumped into the mouth of the Tyranid boarding vessel. Keep in mind that the boarding vessel is also alive, so he literally jumped into its mouth and activated Hunger and Slake before straight up marching further into the massive alien spaceship thing's disgusting gullet. There are many examples to point to when demonstrating the badassery of Tyberos, but I think this one sums him up pretty well. It's like, oh, our ship has been attacked and boarded by a living nightmare, a giant spaceship that is actually an alien that is going to spew other aliens into our ship to kill us, and then digest us, and then use our organic matter to turn into more aliens, so it can then attack an entire Imperial world and do the same thing to them? Alright, cool. Let me just power up my fucking fists of justice and jump into its mouth and tear it apart from the inside. Okay, problem solved. And then when he was done dispensing an absolute ass-kicking to this Tyranid monstrosity, he literally just walked back out, covered in disgusting Tyranid guts, and went back to his seat on the bridge of the ship. And while Tyberos is an absolute beast, another character found in the Carcharodons books that I found to be interesting is Calie. I've more or less avoided major spoilers for any of the Carcharodons books up until this point, but as I talk about Calie's journey in the Outer Dark novel, I won't really be able to avoid some pretty important plot points. So if you want to find those out for yourself, just leave, I guess. Thanks. Alright, Calie is a character that is pretty unique amongst his Carcharodon brethren for a number of reasons. First, he seems to at least have somewhat of a personality, and second, he is a potent psyker. In fact, he's in training under the watchful eye of the Carcharodons' chief librarian Te Kahurangi to eventually become the next chief librarian of the chapter. But while he is already quite competent in the use of his psychic abilities, Calie struggles with a very dark secret. As it turns out, when he was first discovered by the Carcharodons as a child, he had already been marked by chaos. As he grew from a child to a neophyte to a fully fledged space marine, the events of his past remained with him, and not just as memories. Calie is quite literally haunted by a demon. It is bound to his soul and appears not only to him, but also to those whose paths are destined to cross with his. The demon appears in real space as a, fair warning, creepy description coming up, tall, slender shape draped in shadows. It is a woman in a dirty, tattered outfit of mourning with a black veil covering her hideous face. Underneath the veil, her flesh appears white, but crossed with a lattice of hideous black veins. Her eyes smolder like coals set deep within sunken eye sockets, and her swollen, gaping mouth is filled with hundreds of needle-like teeth. I'm also recording this voiceover right now completely on my own at night. I don't like this. I'm not having a good time reading this script. Oh my god. This demon has stayed with Calie since his childhood, bound to him, taunting him, leering at him from every dark corner he passes by. He hears its grating, shrieking voice in his head when he meditates, hears it laughing maniacally at him, encouraging his failure, and begging for his fall to corruption whenever he musters his psychic powers. And Calie has never faltered throughout his perilous quest to become a Carcharodon, throughout his intense, mind-bending training to broaden his psychic powers and understand more clearly the depths of the Imperium, and throughout every battle he has ever taken part in, he has remained strong, loyal to his brothers, and loyal to the Emperor. Calie is awesome. In Outer Dark, he even has a badass sorcerer battle against the demon, ultimately banishing it back to the warp. At least, for now. He then proceeds to make his way through the disgusting horde of Genestealer cultists and Xenos that his battle brothers have been fighting, walks up to the Genestealer Patriarch, and touches his finger to its forehead. And guess what? The thing fucking explodes. Calie's amazing. A character that I can't wait to see more of in the future. And finally, I'd like to wind down our video by talking about the origins of the Carcharodons. Their founding is one of the more mysterious aspects of the chapter. They are often hinted very strongly as being direct descendants of Corvus Corax. Even their wiki lists the Raven Guard as their likely ancestral legion. However, things get a little bit murky when you look into the details. When speaking with the Ashenclaws, who are a known direct descendant of the Raven Guard, Baelshar speaks of their shared lineage. But when he insults the Ashenclaws by calling out their inactivity in defending the Imperium, another Ashenclaws warrior calls Shar traitor-born scum. Now, we know that Corax isn't a traitor. In fact, he's currently on a rampage through the Eye of Terror, searching for Lorgar so that he can give him a warp-infused ass-whooping so great that it will echo throughout the galaxy. And we also know that this warrior is not referring to the Carcharodons as traitors in their current endeavors, as they're literally asking the Ashenclaws for assistance in defending an Imperial world. So if Shar is traitor-born scum, and Corax, their supposed genefather, isn't a traitor, obviously, then what other strange, pale, brooding, extremely violent Primarch could be behind their genetic ancestry? Oh, right. That one. While nothing is confirmed as of now, it seems pretty likely that the Carcharodons are at the very best a chapter with a chimeric Geneseed. I have absolutely no idea if I said that right, by the way. That is to say, the Carcharodons in their current form could very well be a genetic mix of Raven Guard and Night Lord, a balance between a legion that would remain loyal to the Imperium under any and all circumstances, and a legion that was offered the opportunity to slaughter anyone and anything for any reason and immediately went, yep, right here, we'll do it, yep, pick us, hello, over here please, yep, we can do that. This explanation does make the most sense, because the Raven Guard and the Night Lords are similar in appearance, but the Night Lords are, well, f***ing terrifying. And as Ashenclaw's chapter master Nahat Nev pointed out, the Carcharodons are viewed as terrifying monsters by the Imperial humans they come across. And that's not at all an exaggeration. When the Carcharodons make contact with any Imperial world with the sole intent of protecting it, and then, taking its population as slaves, they're remembered by the survivors as nightmare-inducing horrors, vicious, soulless predators who exist only to butcher and kill and enslave. So basically, the heroically stepping in to save humans part of their identity is the Raven Guard aspect of their DNA, and the scaring the shit out of everyone and giving everybody lifelong PTSD from just looking at them is probably the Night Lord aspect of their DNA. The Carcharodons are a chapter of mystery. From their origins to their future, everything surrounding them is shrouded with uncertainty. One thing that is certain, however, is that the Carcharodons offer a flair of originality and weirdness that is very, very welcome in the 41st millennium. And you know what else is very certain? That I appreciate the hell out of my channel members. If I was a giant, silent, creepy, hulking behemoth of a chapter master, you guys would be the gauntlets with barbed power blades and undermounted mechanized chain blades on my ridiculously large hands. And today we're welcoming aboard two new channel members, Matej Jervenka and Shadow V2. Thanks for joining, guys. If you'd like to become a member, you can do so through the link in the description. I didn't get the chance in this video to talk about the Carcharodons' latest activity in the Badab Wars and what their involvement in the 40k setting looks to be in the future, but I would love to make a follow-up video to this one to discuss that, if there's enough interest. So let me know if you'd like to see it. And until next time, thank you so much for watching. See ya!